I think all we're really missing now is the hype man Alex Abrahantes. Here's a look at the Jazwares Vault exclusive AEW Death Triangle. Form a triple threat with the Death Triangle Vault exclusive. This deluxe 3-figure set features the AEW World Trios Champions Pac, Rey Fenix, and Penta El Zero Miedo. Each highly posable 6-inch action figure includes 25 points of articulation and is inspired by Death Triangle's first championship victory on AEW Dynamite, September 7th, 2022. They all enter the ring with their World Trios Champion belts and come equipped with a pair of alternate hands. AEW Vault exclusive figures are highly posable and use advanced scanning technology to capture realistic details from each of the wrestlers. The Death Triangle Vault exclusive is only available for a limited time and exclusive to Jazwares Vault. If you have zero fear about adding Death Triangle to your current Jazwares AEW figure collection, then this set, though, is a Jazwares Vault exclusive. It's over on their site. I'll provide the links down below in the video description. It's going currently for $80, but it's limited to only 3,000 copies worldwide. I'd like, if I can, to thank the folks over at Jazwares that did provide the sample we could have a look at. Yeah, each one of the figures, by the way, is going to be roughly about the same size, whether it be Rey Fenix, whether it be Penta, or my favorite, Pac. So what I'll do is only just measure one of them. Let's just grab the one in the middle here, Penta. He actually stands at about 6.5 inches in height, or Death Triangle. Each of the individual figures are about 16 centimeters tall. Now entering the ring and this review is the other Vault exclusive figure that Jazwares has currently on their site. Not though from AEW, but here's what Death Triangle looks like with the Ring of Honor exclusive Danhausen. Even if Death Triangle right now aren't the current bearers of the World Trios Championship, that title right now goes to the Bang Bang Gang. Each one of the figures actually come include the AEW World Trios Championship straps. Doesn't matter though if you grab the one from Pac or you grab the one from Penta or even Fenix, they're all identical to one another. They're nicely molded here. As you can see, they're on the front main plates. You've got AEW World Championship Trios. On the side, you've got slightly smaller plates, but they're just as painted nicely as the front of the belt. The belts themselves, as you can see on the back, is all the way that the plates have been slotted down to the back of the more rubbery plastic. Unfortunately, though, some of the straps, like you can see right now, not that I don't remember which one this actually belonged to, but some of them actually, unfortunately, have slightly bent pegs. If you had the plan, for example, to take the strap and wrap it around the waist, normally, though, you would just take these pegs and feed them into the provided holes. But with the pegs being so bent like this, it's next to impossible to get these closed. It doesn't really matter for me, at least, because I'm going to just only ultimately strap this over their shoulders anyways. That's usually how I end up displaying the figures. There are a few of them, unfortunately, though, like this one here, where the front plate seems to keep frequently falling off the back of the plastic. So I'm going to see if I can have to fix that. So while all three of them do come include the AEW World Trios Championships, Pac actually gets one additional title. Now back then when he would have won this was the AEW All-Atlantic Championship, which was then later changed to the International Championship. I think International works a little bit better. The plates are a little bit more squared off versus, say, for example, the Trios, which would be much rounder. A much blockier looking plates also on the side. Very difficult to actually fit this around the waist. Again, like if you're looking at the pegs, boy, those pegs are really warped. I'm sure there's probably a way I can go in there and heat these up just a little bit to bend them across, just so that they actually can fit into the holes. Let me just see if I can do this right now. I can get a couple of them in, but man, it's becoming very difficult to get these actually closed. Again, I'll just probably likely have them over the shoulders anyways. Right now, though, he isn't even the bearer of the International Championship. That right now is Will Ospreay, one of my favorite wrestlers in wrestling as a whole. Let's just move those off to the side. The figures also come included with interchangeable hands. Each one of the figures, for example, depending on how you start out of the packaging, they either have closed fists or they sort of have gripping hands. Or in the case of Rey Fenix, he has gestured hands as well. So Pac, for example, gets himself closed fists. Really much different. I mean, there's no tattoos or anything on that, unlike Rey Fenix and Penta, which would have tattoos on them. Penta's hands are pretty much straightforward plastic. These can just pop off from the existing forms that he has right now. He has gripping hands. So really, if you wanted to, you could also have the figures holding the straps. Say, for example, if you want to just have them displayed this way, you can also do that as well. We'll go back to Pac. Pac's my favorite, really, of this set. Like I said, Penta also does come included with his versions of his hands. One gripping hand, one closed-fisted hand. You can see some additional printing on there with the additional tattoos. Nice looking hands. Rey Fenix also has something very similar. He has, again, gripping hands, if I can actually hold on to these. Gripping hands that also hold, again, the Trios Championships. Or what I've already done, one of the hands actually already had this gesture. I just simply popped off the other hand. It's just a case of obviously unpegging these from the post there. There we go, like that. But I actually like to have Rey Fenix really displayed kind of where the way he actually poses when he comes out from the ring. A little harder to kind of pull off just because his head's kind of in the way. But he usually does sort of this self-high five, maybe inspirational cue from DDP. I like to display the figure with that, though. But again, it's just a case of popping off the hands from the forearms. Maybe what actually, you know what, while we actually have Rey Fenix in my hands, let's actually look at the figure first. Rey Fenix, I'm glad to see he's actually back. At the time of doing this review, Rey Fenix was off for a while with an injury, and now he's been brought back, and now Death Triangle is reformed. So it's kind of really fitting that we're now looking at this vault exclusive of Death Triangle, now that actually Death Triangle are actually now back on TV. From the sculpting of his standpoint, for the sculpt of his head sculpt, I think they've done a really nice job. Now, obviously, the costumes change throughout the course of... I mean, it's really hard to kind of get a current roster going because their outfits are always changing. Rey Fenix, I'm sure, has something very similar to this of a ring outfit. I mean, obviously, for the way they've painted the head sculpts, not only can you see his eyes and his mouth really nicely, but you can also see as well they've added some really nice pattern work all across the front of his mask. As it being a luchador mask, it's always, again, unheard of that the mask will ever come off. Every once in a while, especially like Rey Mysterio, for example, back in the WCW days, would have had, in fact, a hair versus mask match, where, in fact, he lost his mask. But usually it's just unheard of for a luchador to ever lose his mask. But again, you got some nice additional gold there added on the bottom. I'm sure we've gotten ourselves countless Rey Fenixes, but this just happens to be the one that we get here from the Death Triangle release. He's got some nice tattoos there all across his body as well. Going back and looking at the original source material, I think the tattoos are fairly accurate. So the fact that they would then go in and match everything to the way he appears in the TV, I mean, really nice looking tattoos overall. Down below on his trunks, some nice additional silver added in there as well. Of course, you got some larger looking boots down below there as well. The thing, unfortunately, though, about Rey Fenix is that his ankle articulation, that we'll kind of talk more about in a moment, because the way they've actually sculpted the boots, I had to kind of really fight them. And then I realized when I got this guy out of the packaging that his ankle was kind of turned like this. So I was really trying to force it. And I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized when he came out of the packaging, his ankle was facing the opposite way. So I had to make sure I just turned that around before I really put a lot of pressure against that. For the figure's articulation now, all the three figures of Death Triangle are going to have pretty much the same levels of articulation. So like Rey Fenix, for example, is going to have a head rotates all the way around with a ball joint. It looks up pretty high, actually, and looks down. You can also... Yeah, here's the thing I've also noticed here with Dan. When we looked at Danhausen, now kind of carrying it over to Death Triangle, all kind of figures have very limited articulation when it comes to moving their heads back and forth. Sure, yes, they can move them up and move them down, but try to rock the heads back and forth becomes next to impossible. As for the arms, though, they rotate all the way around. You can bring the arms out at 90 degrees, even further from 90 degrees, actually. Figure has a swivel in his bicep, double hinge on his elbow, and the hands do rotate all the way around. Rey Fenix also has an upper torso ball joint, a lower torso abdomen joint. The figure also has ball joints. Even though they haven't unfortunately painted them, this would be probably part of a Rey Fenix that he wouldn't want you to see, and probably you would not likely be looking at all the time when it comes to the figure. But he does have flesh-colored ball joints on the insides of his thighs. I mean, obviously, you're really never going to be looking at the figure like this anyways, but it's just more for me to point out the fact that the figure has some decent levels of posability. Legs go forward, legs go back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh, or a swivel right here, but then additionally to that, he also has 3/4 of the way up the thigh, a swivel cut. So he could rotate here, but he can also rotate here as well. Double hinge on the knee. And again, articulation here for the ankle. A little nice rock back and forth there as well. The only other thing I would also say, too, when it comes to Jazwares AEW figures, and I've started to notice this, is that even though they do have pegals on the bottoms of their feet, boom and boom, the pegs are actually larger than regular display stands. So I tried to use, like, for example, the display stand from McFarlane Toys in the hopes that they would be using the same universally sized pegs. And it wasn't the case. They actually are using slightly larger holes, which means that if you wanted to put these guys in creative looking poses, if the off chance that down the road maybe Jazwares releases display stands, you could do that. But right now, they're not going to be able to work with just regular display stands that you get from other figure companies. So there's Rey Fenix. We're going to move down the line here and now look at Penta. Penta's a nice looking figure. And again, like with his ring outfit always changing, it's kind of hard to really get like a definitive version of Penta, but I think they've landed one really nicely here. Now, his actual luchador mask is a little bit more different in the sense that he has now drapes there on the sides. The head sculpt is nicely painted. He paints, though, not only his eye area, but he also paints his lower mouth as well. And I think they've done a nice job on that. To again capture all the details that you would see in the actual ring outfit and just shrink that down in size. I think all the boxes, for the most part, they've checked off here. He's got the tattoos, obviously, there on the arms. The only thing I would say, though, from looking at Penta, is that the coloring on his skin seems like a little yellowish. I wouldn't be able to say like 100% that that's the accurate skin color the way he actually is in the show. But I feel like maybe his skin coloring is a little too jaundice, a little too yellowish. Again, like the tattoos are nicely printed there on his arms, down below here on his forearms. Now with his hands, again, like with his hands, you can actually pop these off. The only thing, unfortunately, he loses though, is now he doesn't have a glove. So if you were to say pop that off and then replace it with this hand, he now would have basically taped off hands as opposed to a full glove. That's the only thing that's a little bit different when it comes to Penta. He also has, of course, the symbol of Zero Mierda. Of course, he can have the figure displayed that way. Likely, though, I'm probably going to be having this guy on the shelf as you're currently seeing right now. Very cool, the fact that they'd have him that with the additional hands that they include with the figure. Now, again, when he has, for the rest of his body, he has this skirting piece. This is softer plastic, and basically what it is over top of a regular AEW figure body. I'm always finding myself having to kind of move this back down, because whenever I go to start to move Penta's body, for example, I always find myself shifting this up accidentally, so I always have to kind of pull it back down. Again, his articulation is going to be the exact same, though, as Rey Fenix Pro. Not really worth, I'm sure, to go through it again. But again, like really nice additional printing that they've got here. Some of the printing, unfortunately, doesn't line up, though. I mean, depending on how you really twist the legs, as you start to twist the legs, you'll see that his little dragon motif that he's got on the side, obviously it doesn't stay kind of in line with one another. But overall, again, nice looking figure on Penta. My favorite, though, of the three figures is Pac. I'm so glad that Pac, first of all, has come back to AEW. Again, I think he's had an injury for a while, and he really has been overseas for a while as well. Now, he's got right now, I think, a feud, is it the Bang Bang Gang? I think he's got a feud right now with Jay White, more specifically. So again, I'm really looking forward to seeing what the two of them are going to do in the ring. From a head sculpt standpoint, Pac's a really messy looking guy. So he's always got like hair kind of draping in front of his face. And I think they've done a pretty decent enough job on that, except for this area right here. You can see that he has a beard for the most part. Pac's always really notorious, too, that he never has a fully sculpted or fully grown-in beard. It always sort of seems to grow in patches. But then if you look at this side here of his face, I think it's nicely painted here. But unfortunately, though, because it's gotten so close to the drapery of hair that he has on this side, there's one little area, and I can't stop looking at it right here, that I think could have used a little bit of additional brown. I'm sure they probably did that deliberately so it would look then separate from the rest of his hair, but by leaving this section right here flesh colored like this, it does obviously look like a little bit of paint's been left off. Head sculpt low for Pac looks good. Now, he doesn't have as much of a complicated ring outfit as, say, Rey Fenix or Penta. Simple looking trunks, kind of more of like a dark gray on the sides, and he's got kind of from the front of it kind of looks like Val Venus's ring trunks. Some decent sculpting down below there, also on his boots and his boot guards. And again, just a nice looking figure. Really, really happy with how this one, of the three, definitely Pac is my favorite. Again, the articulation on this guy is going to be exactly the same, so it's probably no sense to going through that. The only thing I would say, though, about Pac's articulation is because he, again, has the hair that comes down on one side, it becomes a little bit more difficult to try to rotate the head around, and it becomes especially more difficult to bring his head down just because that's in the way of things. But again, like all the articulation is going to be pretty much the exact same as both the other two Lucha Brothers that we've already had a look at, but definitely by far, Pac is my favorite. It's a nice looking set overall. Now again, like this is very limited over on the Jazwares Vault site. As it is right now, it's limited to only 3,000 copies. I think when we in fact looked at Danhausen, which we can bring back in Danhausen just because again, that was the only other Jazwares Vault figure we've looked at so far. He was, I think, limited to 5,000, and now Death Triangle being limited to a lot less than that with 3,000. There's a good likelihood that this set's going to sell out fast. If you are a big fan, for example, let's just get these titles out of the way. If you're a big fan, though, of Death Triangle, like I'm a big fan of Death Triangle, it's definitely a set I would recommend picking up. Quite the nice trios sets of trios champions, if though a little outdated. Death Triangle right now don't have the straps, but with Jay White already picking a fight with Pac, I'm sure it won't be long before the Lucha Brothers join in on the fight and we can build back up the rivalry. In one corner, the Bang Bang Gang, and in the opposite, Death Triangle with the straps on the line. Speaking of straps, though, while the AEW Trios Championships do look good with Death Triangle, the quality of some of the belts are in bad shape. Specifically, the front metal there, or the plates on the front of the one that Penta's holding, I can't seem to get back properly into the strap. It seems to hook in place, and yet for reasons unknown, I can't get ever the plate back in place. I'm going to see if I can soften the plastic up just enough that maybe if I stretch it, I can get the front plate wedged back in there. I hate to really glue it because I wouldn't want to damage the plate. And obviously you want to make these things flexible so they can fit around their waist. Speaking of also fitting around their waist, some of the pegs, unfortunately, on the ends of the belt are a little warped. You probably can already see it there on Pentas. I'm probably going to have to heat that up also so it can attach properly to the loops on the other sides. Not only do they all come included with the AEW Trios Championships, but Pac does also one better by also including the international title. Does he have the title right now? No, that goes with Ospreay, but I'm always happy when a figure company includes things like extra belts. It go a long way, especially if if you ever one that likes to play with your wrestling figures, not that I admit to playing with my wrestling figures, but if you ever do, it's always nice to have belts on the line. Now, this set, though, of Death Triangle, of course, consisting of Pac, Rey Fenix, and Penta El Zero Miedo, are all available right now as a set on the Jazwares Vaults site. It's a limited site. It's a limited set of only 3,000 pieces, and it's currently going right now for $80. At the time of doing this video, the set is still available, but the long-time plans of that still being in stock, it's hard to really say. I mean, with anyone being interested in Death Triangle and the fact that these are also exclusives, one of the most loyal fans out there of collecting figures are wrestling fans. They're the ones that get any exclusives they can get their hands on. The likelihood, though, of this set sticking around is probably quite slim, especially with the limited number that they're being released by. If you're interested, like I said, these are exclusives only to Jazwares Vault. I'll put the link down below in the video description if you want to get this one for yourself. Big thank you once again to the folks over at Jazwares that did provide the sample of the AEW Death Triangle Jazwares Vault exclusive, that we could have a chance to have a look in this review. Let me know what you guys think of the set down below in the comments section, and also if you're collecting the Jazwares AEW figure line. If you guys also enjoyed this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you'd like to stick around for more, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.